Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very special edition of University Series. Today, we'll be having a fireside chat with Jan Avery, who is the CTO of Expertis, an IBM company. And we'll be covering the subject of what is cybersecurity. My name is Karina Riviello from FinTech Kittens, and as usual, I will be your host for this very special session. So our guest speaker today is Jan Avery from Expertis. So Jan, can you please come in with me on stage? Hello, Jan.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So Jan, you are the CTO of Expertis. Can you tell me a bit more about Expertis and what you do at Expertis?
Yes, for sure. So basically, Expertis is in the payment space. We're both a Swift service bureau, and we also provide value-added applications for large corporates and financial institutions to service their payment needs, basically.
Great. So I'm really happy to have you today because, as you know, we have a challenge with you guys for the formaton that's coming up. And we thought it would be interesting to maybe have a little fireside chat on cybersecurity to help maybe contestants and anybody who wants to know more about cybersecurity, what this field is all about. So this little high-level fireside chat with you. So thank you for being here with me today.
For sure.
Let's hop in. Let's jump into the questions. So I have a first very high-level question for you, and it's very simple. It's what exactly is cybersecurity?
Sure. So cybersecurity is basically the practice of protecting critical system and sensitive data from digital attacks. So basically, cybersecurity measures are designed to combat threats against, network systems and applications, whether those originate from either inside or outside of an organization.
Yeah, great. It's a good, very good topo on what exactly is cybersecurity. So maybe a more general question is, what are some common cyber attacks that we observe in general, and what exactly do they consist of?
Sure. One of the biggest trends right now in cyber attacks is ransomware, which is basically malware that's installed on your network, on like an organization's network, and basically the hackers are threatening to publish the data that they kind of make a hostage, and basically they're requesting a bounty to be paid in order for them to not reveal that sensitive data. There's a lot of that going on recently in the recent years. That's one of the big trendy ones. I don't know if you've heard, but I think it was earlier this year in Central Florida, there was an actually a water plant, like a water treatment plant, that was actually attacked, and basically the hackers they changed the chemical levels in the water, and they threatened that if this water treatment plant did not provide such and such amount of money, they would poison all of the local residents. So that was one. And just earlier this month there was another one with Colonial Pipeline, which owns one of these huge gas pipelines, and they basically took hostage the entire East Coast. And they actually, I think they got $5 million. Like the Colonial Pipeline company paid $5 million for the hackers to release of whatever they were doing with their system. So that's pretty nasty. So that's one of the biggest or the most popular one that we can see. And there's obviously the older classic phishing attempts and social engineering and all of those that have been around for a while, and even ransomware has been around for a while, but we've been hearing a lot more recently with those. So yeah.
You're talking about social engineering. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, social engineering. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Basically, it's people approaching, like hackers approaching people and asking them questions that seem very innocent at first, but basically they're kind of building a file on you with all of that information about you, and basically they're just building up data with you about you, and they use that data after to gain access to some systems, because when you're calling your bank or different places, they're always asking you about things like, what's your mother's maiden name, what's your date of birth, what's this, what's that. And basically these hackers, they're trying to build that information, and with that information they can actually gain access to some systems.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's funny because on Facebook sometimes I see people, there's like these online games on the social networks, and people, they don't really think about it, but they're actually revealing a lot of their information. Like I saw one question, like I think it was 2 weeks ago, like asking about what was, just for the fun of it and just to kind of get a feel for your old people names, like what was your grandfather's name or grandmother's name, and people were actually replying and answering that. I was like, oh, people, just don't do that. You're revealing too much information about yourself, and that can actually be used against you by
Um,
hackers. So
Interesting. I
yeah,
like it. That's a really interesting perspective because I mean, we all use social media
yeah,
and we don't necessarily think of those things when we play these fun little games online. We just think it's
exactly.
very innocent, right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Same for year of birth. They ask you, "Oh, what's your year of birth?" Just for fun. But yeah, it's fun. But you're providing like vital information about yourself that can be used against you. So
Well,
yeah,
and our year of birth is usually also a lot of people put them up on their Facebook page actually, so it's already
that's true. That's true. But again, be careful with that kind of stuff because it can be used against you at some point. So yeah,
definitely. Interesting. That's so like maybe quick mistakes on what we do, but I like to maybe jump in on mistakes that maybe companies do
yeah.
make. What are some common mistakes that companies make when we're talking about protecting personal information and sensible data?
Yeah, sure. A common mistake that we see is like people are not necessarily putting in place what we call a zero trust security strategy. What's a zero trust strategy? Well, basically, in software, there's multiple applications kind of communicating with each other within an organization's network. And when you have zero trust, what that means is that each of those components are secured in such a way that even though the other components are within the trusted zone, they will still require these other components to properly identify themselves, and they're not trusting them because they're within the perimeter. Uh, the contrary to zero trust is like where people are configuring all of their systems without these different security mechanisms because they assume that security is at the perimeter. Basically, you have like this strong security at the perimeter, and all of the components within the perimeter, they don't really challenge for security because they're assuming if you're inside the perimeters because you're already secured. But that's the thing, when a hacker gains access to one of your system, if you don't have zero trust, that means they can actually hop onto another system and another and another, and then they can actually increase their footprint. So that's why zero trust is very important, because then each of those systems within your perimeter, they will not trust that another system is a friendly system because it could have been compromised. So that's kind of the approach with zero trust, and that should definitely be in place. This way, if a hacker does come into your system and they do compromise one system, they'll be limited to that one system because everything else will be still secured. So that's I think one of the key things in security is like zero trust.
Interesting. I never heard of the zero trust framework, and also like it's. I mean, I think it's also a common mistake that they neglect a lot how much important it can be to really protect personal information. So that's
Correct.
an interesting perspective. I like to maybe jump on the other side of the
Okay.
game. So for companies, of course, they have to think of these fraudulent activities. But if you were a cyber criminal, what exactly would you do to access sensitive data?
Right.
Let's reverse engineer. Let's think of what they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not, so it's kind of hard for me to answer that question. But if I were, I would definitely go down the path of doing social engineering. I think um, people are like not naive, but they want to help, or they want to play these games online or whatever. There's all kinds of different tricks that can be played on them, and it's very subtle because they don't kind of get, they're not connecting all the dots, and that's what hackers are doing. They're just using social engineering, and that's what I would do, and like try and ask questions and trying to get friends with someone, or trying to approach and build something that can be used. And then once you have this little piece, you can get a bigger piece of information, and then with that a bigger and bigger, and then at some point you're actually able to maybe do an account takeover, or like account takeover is basically when you lose your account to the hacker. Basically, the hacker takes control of your, let's say, your Gmail, and once you get access to someone's Gmail, you basically have a lot, because then you can go on all of these other websites, and then you can just do reset password, and then when you do reset password, the email goes into your Gmail, and then in the Gmail, then they can get your Facebook, everything, because everything ties back to your emails. So it's very important. So I think, like, to answer your question, I think I would really go down the path of social engineering to kind of get into the person's head, and get as much information as possible to do an account takeover.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's interesting because when we're talking about cybersecurity and cyber protection, I mean, we often think of the responsibility of companies also, but I think as individuals also, we are
Yeah.
a weak link in this.
Exactly. Yep. It starts with the human. The human is the weakest link, and hackers know about that. That's why they're always, not always, but often going through that, because it is the weakest link. Yep.
Mhm,
Totally.
mhm. So interesting. When we're talking about the main targets, so of course individuals are a target for these hackers and cyber criminals, but in terms of company wise, do you think there are companies that are more easily targeted, or are more prone to be targeted? Example, if we're looking maybe at SMEs, fintechs, or big corporations, is it equally hacked, or are there like more younger companies to be prone to be hacked?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like, in most cases, I mean, there's different types of hackers. Some are like more like they have like a social agenda, or things like that. But most often it's about the money, right? That's what they're after. So in the earlier days, with like before ransomware was in place, hackers were more targeting companies that would handle financial transactions in some way, shape, or form, and then they would just try and get access to that financial data, and then get money from that and stuff like that. But that was one, and the other one was also, if you had like significant infrastructure, like processing power, because hackers would actually trying to take over this infrastructure to do cryptocurrency mining. Basically, they would gain access to your network and install these bots on all of your computers to just do crypto mining, because that's going to bring them money, right? Like, again, they're looking for some way to make money. But as we mentioned earlier, with ransomware, now any company is actually vulnerable, because, or not vulnerable, but a target, because they don't care what you're doing, right? They're just going to take your data, and then they're just going to um, ask you for ransom and say, like, if you don't give us this or that, we'll just dump this data on the internet. So that makes everyone kind of a target, whereas before it was a bit more focused on those two types of companies. Either you had financial processing that they could take advantage of, or you'd add infrastructure that they could install crypto mining. So now I think it's even worse, because everyone should be worried.
Interesting, interesting. I'm always curious to know, like, who are the people behind this? Do we have a picture or an idea of what these hackers look like? And also, I'd be curious to know, like, do hackers usually hack like in their own country? Are they like a network of people across the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is known that a lot of these hacking groups come from Russia or other Eastern European countries. Um, they do act in groups. Often, yeah, they seem like they're alone, but it's often a group of people, or at least they use this distributed schemes to make sure they're coming. They appear to be coming from different countries, so that if their IP gets blocked, they're not really blocked, because they go through different VPNs from different countries, and they're very well organized. So it is known that a lot of them come from Russia or Eastern Europe. But also it is known that a lot of the activity also results from some internal leakage or help within the companies at some point, either voluntarily or involuntarily, through social engineering. I think it's really important for companies to have like good security practices in place to prevent, or like identify employees that may have gone rogue, or that have revealed some information about the infrastructure, things like that, without maybe even knowing about it. So
Yeah, these accidents can happen. We've seen recently
Yeah,
with the Desjardins situation.
exactly.
Um, so interesting. I'm curious to know also, would you say there are more hacking activities or cyber criminal activities going on today compared to a few years ago?
I think so. Like with the the COVID that hit us, like more than a year ago, a
Mhm.
lot of companies had to kind of rush their way into providing remote access to their infrastructures so that their employees could work remotely. So that definitely opened up a lot of holes for hackers to try and get into the systems, because all of that work was done really quickly with for some companies that were not really that savvy in that with security and whatnot, so they were kind of rushed into that, and hackers know about that, so they're really trying to take advantage of the situation. By now I would think things have stabilized a bit, because it's been more than a year, but I'm pretty sure there's still a lot of holes, and hackers are having fun right now trying to poke into those holes.
Yeah, that's definitely something we see. There's so many things that have been accelerated by the COVID, unlike what we might have expected. Well, I mean, the whole situation was unexpected, as we all know, but interesting. So, in terms of protecting themselves, especially now that we have more and more of these hacking situations that are possibly happening, what are some tools that businesses can use to protect themselves from these cyber criminals?
Right. There are many different tools and best practices that help. I would say like a common and minimal approach to, is to actually carry out regular pen testing against your system. So pen testing is basically you as an organization, you hire a third party company that will attempt to penetrate your system. So basically they're like hackers, but they're not there to harm you. They're just there to identify maybe some weak spots that you have in your system, and they'll produce like a comprehensive report of every single finding they have, so that you can actually fix everything and make sure your infrastructure is as tight as it should be. So that's probably the minimal I would say you need to do. And obviously like employee vigilance, and making sure everyone uses best practices, such as using like strong passwords, distinct passwords across systems, and use MFA and 2FA like protection. Like when you receive those codes via your phone, that's like an additional security on top of the password, because if your password does get compromised, then a hacker won't be able to get in, because they don't have access to your phone. At least they shouldn't. So those are like more like best practices, but definitely things that should be put in place by every company out there. And educate people also around like social engineering and things like that. Yeah. And there's also AI that can be used to analyze logs, and identify potential usage scenarios that kind of don't like are not following a certain pattern, and then they could be flagged as potential risks, or attempts that are not really aligned with what the organization is typically doing. For example, if you have in your logs, you start having traffic coming in from Russia, or Korea, or whatever, some odd country that you're not doing business with, that could be a sign that something fishy is going on there.
Interesting. So, and it's interesting also because you mentioned also the responsibility us as individuals, the responsibility of the companies also internally. Um, a question that I mean is a tricky one that's always on our mind, especially when we're thinking about open banking. Uh, right now, we're having more and more of these fintech applications that people can use, and of course, when you're using these applications, you are giving access to very sensible data because you have to link them with your bank account. So that question, the $100 question is, who do you think should bear this responsibility of protecting the data in these cases? Is it consumers? Is it the fintechs that offer these applications, or ultimately the financial institutions that are behind the sensitive data?
Yeah, that's actually a good question, and it's a very gray area, I would think. So I think it's kind of a shared responsibility. The consumer needs to be careful not to reveal any of information unless it's necessary. And on the other side, like the fintechs and the FIs, when they acquire that information from their KYC process, they should really treat that information very diligently, and with high security, and it is PII, right? Like so it's important that the information remains very secure. In Europe, there are things like GDPR, and I know like similar legislations are coming along in different other countries that will dictate a lot more, how that information should be treated, and like users are entitled to have their information removed at any point if they ask for that. So I know it's not really here yet, but I think that's where things are going. So I think it's a shared responsibility between everyone, like all of the involved parties.
Interesting. Okay. Maybe last question to finish off. I know it went by so fast, and you had so much to say and share. Maybe a last question is, what are some interesting innovations out there in the cybersecurity space, maybe to inspire formaton participants or even people at home who are interested to know more about what's happening out there in the cybersecurity space? So happy to have your take on that.
Sure. I personally think AI and machine learning are probably the strong innovations that are actually tangible, that are usable today, that could help in that space. Like I said, we mentioned that a bit earlier. You could like have some pattern recognition around usage patterns, where you see things that are not really lining up with your typical usage pattern. So I think AI could definitely be used in there, and also something that's maybe more in the future, but not that really far off in the future, is quantum computing. Because with quantum computing, it's actually creating a new problem. Like with all of our current encryptions that we have, like all the current encryption algorithms that we have today, with quantum computing, they can actually be cracked like super easily. So that computing power brings computing power, which actually can be used to crack all of these current encryption algorithms that we have today. So it's causing new problems. So we'll need, like, and I know IBM and many other companies are actually working right now on resolving that problem, because with that new power comes, if it's not put in the right hands, it can be used against you. So like data could be collected today, it's encrypted, so nobody can actually see it, and we don't have the computing power to crack that data today. But tomorrow, with quantum computing, we could crack that data super easily. So that brings more problems. So it's an interesting thing. And I think quantum computing will actually be used to create new algorithms that can be stronger and tougher to crack as well. So yeah, that's probably my take on like technologies that can be used towards improving our security today and in the near future.
Interesting. And I'm also excited about quantum computing. We're hearing it's a space that's moving right now. Well, moving slowly but surely. But yeah, interesting. And like as you say, we find new technologies, and hackers also find new ways to crack. So it's like an ongoing problem, but it's an interesting one. And so, anyways, thank you so much, Avery. That was a very interesting chat. I was really happy to have you on, and I hope you had as much fun teaching me everything you had to teach than I had of listening to you. So thank you, and I'll wish you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was nice. Take care. Bye.